right.
Well, I know you got a special disc for me here. I have a surprise for you later, but this is special for multiple reasons. Can you talk to us about what we're throwing?
Yeah, this is the Juju from Ching Disc, and I'll try not to make it sound like a commercial. But this is a company that was formed in 2000, but in 2004 they started making original discs. They had 8 original molds. They were popular. I mean, people liked Ching discs, but they were innovative because they have different characteristics or contours on the flight plate that made it do something unique. And people liked throwing them, but for personal reasons, they shut down in 2014. And it's important that it's for personal reasons because a couple years ago I bought the company. If they went out of business because people didn't like the discs, I'm not buying that company, but people liked them, and so I bought the original molds. I shipped some of them back from China, so they say made in China on the back. They're made in Georgia now. I brought the jobs back to America, but that's it. Now we've re-released Ching discs. Actually, the true story was we bought the company and said we have a partner, an investor. We bought them a few years back, and we were about to launch, and something happened globally that made it hard to get plastic. I can't recall what it was. Something, I don't know, it's slipping my mind, but something happened that made it hard to buy plastic. So we put the release on hold, not our choice. In the meantime, while that was all happening, is when we developed Stokely discs, and then ended up launching those first. But it started with bringing Ching back.
You want to toss it?
I want to toss it so badly.
Let's do it.
All right.
What I love about this is your thumb placement is your preference.
Yes. Well, there's 5 different grooves at different distances from the rim, so you figure out which grip is best for you or where your thumb should go relative to your hand size. The biggest challenge with this disc, or with Ching in general, is to convince people that this isn't some gimmick, because there's been a million different innovative ideas, and most of them are kind of gimmicky and silly, and this is not. You know, an example would be like gyro technology with MVP. That people thought was a gimmick, and then after a little while they went, oh no, this is actually awesome, these discs fly great. This is not a gimmick. These discs, well, hey, we now have video proof. Look at that.
Have you always been interested in like designing discs? Was that always a dream of yours?
Well, I'm not designing discs. I've always wanted to own a disc company. I mean, that's kind of the holy grail, right? I mean, if you're a player, to own your own disc company and to manufacture and make decisions on how you're gonna market them, and like, that's a lot of fun, but it's very expensive. So I got lucky. I have an investor who's a 50-50 partner with me who has financed the whole operation, Stokely Discs and Ching Discs. But he has given me full autonomy over running the company. Oh. So there's nothing about, like, if there's a bad decision made, it's my fault. Like, I made that decision.
Have you always been entrepreneurial? Like, was that a new thing for you, like, recently, or have you always felt like you could do something like that?
So if you read my book, Scott Stokely, Growing Up Disc Golf, my autobiography, and I'm always hesitant to how I phrase this because this can come across arrogant. I'm only stating what's true. Virtually every single way players make money today, I did first. So as far as being entrepreneurial, I started off, I was the first player to bring merchandise to tournaments and set up at Tournament Central. I was traveling doing private lessons. I traveled around the country doing 220 throwing clinics where everybody would come out to a clinic. I was running the Discraft Double Series, which would be the equivalent of you know, the Trilogy Challenge today. Like, I did that first. I had the first Tour Series disc that actually, there were some players before me that put their name on like a Whammo Frisbee, but they weren't making a living off that. I had a Tour Series discs from Discraft that was afforded me purchasing a house. So the entrepreneurial stuff is absolutely, I love. Amazing, right?
Flies great. That little bit of understability. This is like the stability that I chase after. Like neutral, but if you throw it hard enough. See if I got one.
That's an ultimate throw. But look at it. Except I can't see it. Right in the sun.
Oh! Oh! Is that water? Oh, he got it! My bad.
No way, it was great. I got to... Could you imagine if I broke a hip on Jomez?
I would have been sad about that.
That'd be our new series, Breaking a Hip with Scott Stokely. A 2-part episode, before and after. So you know what's cool about playing catch? Like, you know where this is where our sport started, right?
Kind of, yeah.
No, not kind of. So one of the unique things about flying discs is flying discs were not invented as a product to solve a problem or for people to do something. Flying discs were invented because plastic injection molding had been invented, and they're like, oh, we can now make different shapes. And as soon as they did, they went, oh, these things fly differently than a ball. Balls go up and down. Football, basketball, baseball, golf balls, they basically go up and down with slight turn. They said, hey, if we invent these things, they'll go up, down, high, low, right, left, skip, roll. They're like, cool, let's make these things. There was no game they made them for, to the point that on the bottom of the early discs, it was engraved, invent games. So on the back of the early packaging, it said, now you have this thing, go make up games to play, because we got nothing.
Yep, play catch, invent games, yep.
Yep, exactly. So playing catch, they didn't have a use for them. They basically said, we can make these, you go figure it out. So this is where it all started.
That's amazing. Scott, I got something special for you. Come take a look.
All right.
I got a surprise.
Yes.
And those of you Discraft heads out there might be surprised by this as well. This is a Discraft Sky Star.
I see.
Yeah.
It's not a Sky Streak.
No, Sky Streak came out in '83. This is the 4th PDGA approved disc from Discraft. Okay. In 1981, the Ultra Star came out. That is the only other disc that came out with it. And Sky Streak and all their other stuff started coming out in '83, same time as the Innova Eagle, all those other discs started coming out, or at least getting PDGA approved.
Sure.
I am hearing that not many people know about this disc, and it sounds like you didn't either.
No, I'm actually mesmerized because I feel like I know most everything from the early days of disc golf. I'm not familiar with this disc, so you actually did. You said you were going to surprise me, and I was like, yeah, give it your best shot.
Well, this was their first attempt at like a legit golf disc. It's a little bit more dense.
It's very similar. It has a similar top to the Sky Streak.
Yeah, yep. I think that was probably a modification of this disc.
Sure, I mean that would make sense, but it's definitely, how does it fly?
Flies great.
Does it?
Let's toss it. So this is pretty stable, but like still slow.
Right.
But it holds that stable edge so nicely.
Yes. But this is, I mean, I told you I am a Frisbee player who disc golfs because that's the Frisbee sport I can make a living playing.
Yeah.
But I like disc sports, period. Like I was never good at ultimate because I'm not good at running, but that doesn't mean I don't love it as a sport. It just means it's a sport where everybody's better than me.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed, well, I've known this, but you've played in some Bud Light sponsored disc golf tournaments.
Yeah, lots of them.
Talk about that involvement from your perspective. Was it a time that Frisbee players and disc golfers were excited and optimistic about the sport's future, or was it just a regular thing?
So, people say all the time, they're like, are you surprised by how far the sport's come? And my answer is, not only am I not surprised, none of us are. Any older player that says they're surprised how far the sport's come does not remember every conversation we ever had during lunch where we all said, this is going to be the sport of the future. So we all believed this was going to happen. We just thought it was gonna happen next year.
Yeah.
It was the timeline. We just didn't understand marketing, we didn't understand demographics, we didn't understand return on investment from sponsors. We just didn't, we thought, well, Frisbee's so cool, of course everyone's gonna wanna watch us. And we were not correct in our assessment.
Nice, there you go. All right, all right.
But
oh! I did a long interview with Ken Climo last year, and he talked very vividly about his first trip to California.
yeah.
And experiencing the talent and like the disc golf culture. On the opposite side, what was your first impression of him when you first saw him play and when you first met him?
So my first impression of Ken, well, let me kind of back up. For some weird reason, like this was during the like the Tupac, Biggie Smalls era, East Coast, West Coast. And there was this weird kind of like East Coast, West Coast rivalry, which was, it didn't make any sense, but it was just, you know, they were the Easterners, we were the Westerners, and so, you know, it was tribal. So everybody just talked crap. I mean, it wasn't fun, but everybody would talk crap about the East Coast guys, and I'm sure they felt the same about the West Coast guys. So I didn't go to the first World Championships Ken Climo won. My friend Riley Manderscheid did. And so after the tournament, because there was no internet, he shows up like we had to wait till the next day. I'm like, who won? He goes, Ken Climo. I'm like, where is he from? And Riley's like, he's from Florida. And I'm like, is he any good? And this is the point where Riley's supposed to go, no, he's an Easterner, he got lucky. And I kid you not, to this day I remember, I said, is he any good? And Riley looks at me and he looked scared. And he went, yeah, he's really, really good. And I remember he looked scared and also complimented this East Coast guy. And I was like, oh, uh-oh. Like, I think we might be in trouble. Yeah, and then by the way, it turned out to be accurate.
Yeah, well, he also gave me some info that I needed to ask your perspective on. I asked him about the development of the forehand.
Yeah.
And, you know, discs like the Viper and like overstable stuff came out in the early 90s, but there still weren't that many guys gravitating towards that power sidearm. And Climo said a lot of it was the equipment, but I still don't get it.
No.
What, from your perspective, what was that?
So, I didn't invent the sidearm, obviously.
Of course.
You know, it was invented probably on the third person to throw a Frisbee or a flying disc probably invented it. I tend to give Victor Malafronte, along with Ken Westerfield and some other players of the 70s, credit for mastering it. The Berkeley 6, you know, Roddick, Jim Kenner, he was around before the late 60s. You know, they were all throwing this shot because you were playing games. But it had basically fallen out of fashion by the 80s as far as at a competitive level. It just was viewed as disc golf was a game where you throw a Frisbee backhand. And from a very early age, I realized that was absurd. It's just a mathematical thing. When you can spin a disc both directions, you create flight characteristics and flight trajectories you can't get spinning a disc only one way. But not only that, every disc made, golf disc especially, fades a certain direction. A clockwise spinning disc fades left at the end of its flight. You can't throw a disc with clockwise speed and end its flight to the right. It's impossible. You can turn it to the right the whole flight, it can turn late, but it can't end and tail off. Which means that when you throw a hyzer, especially with an overstable disc, you don't have to be as precise with your angle, which means when you miss your angle by, let's say, 4 degrees, on a hyzer with an overstable disc, it goes to the same place. You miss an anhyzer by 4 degrees, it goes to radically different places. So you don't have to be as precise. It's mathematically correct to spin the disc both directions, depending on the hole. So I knew this, and I could not understand in the 90s why nobody was doing this, because it was so clearly wrong. Now, Ken didn't have much of a sidearm, but that didn't mean that sidearm wasn't a great throw. What it means is Ken was so much better than me at his backhand that even the strokes I made up on the sidearm holes weren't enough to beat him.
Yeah.
Had Ken had a sidearm like mine, I mean, he almost never lost anyways. If he had my sidearm, he might have gone 7 or 8 years without losing a tournament, and that's not an exaggeration. Instead of simply winning most of them.
Yeah.
I traveled around the country, and I went to 220 cities to do throwing clinics. And without exception, at every single throwing clinic, I said to the local club, the only reason you can get away with not having a sidearm is because no one else here does either.
Yeah.
As soon as they start developing a sidearm, you're at a competitive disadvantage if you don't have one. And it is the truth. Like, there are holes on the Pro Tour where Gannon Burr would never play closest to the pin with me on that hole, his backhand versus my sidearm.
Yeah.
He would laugh at you and go, well, no, of course not. So I just wasn't good enough at the other parts of my game to make up that difference.
I see.
But yeah, I mean, the game should be 50-50. When you step up to a hole, unless it's a wide open hole or a perfectly straight shot or a hole with 2 identical hyzer fairways, then that hole is a clockwise spinning hole or a sideways, counterclockwise spinning hole, and you are throwing the hardest shot half the time if you only have one of those throws. It's obvious to me. But again, back then when the best player in the world was so much better than the rest of us and didn't have it, I think that was misleading.
Yeah.
But it's a testament, again, to how good he was that he could almost convince people he didn't need a sidearm because he didn't have one and he's beating you.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the PDGA just randomly back then said, nope, nothing can be faster than this. This is it, and we're not gonna budge on it. How much different would technique be, like as it evolves over time? And how far would the best players be throwing now with one of these?
So there was some talk. So the PDGA did create a standard on how beveled a disc can be. And they actually created it off of a Discraft disc. It was the Eclipse from Discraft. Was discs were getting more beveled and faster. And when the Eclipse came out, that was when they said, we're gonna stop here. Because they didn't outlaw the Eclipse, but they just said you can't be any sharper than that. So there was a line, but there was talk about changing that to AVR or aero level bevel. And it wouldn't have changed the game really because our perspective would have changed. You know, when you go out now and you see a 550-foot hole, we would just view a 430-foot hole the same way.
Yeah.
You know, it's still Anthony Barella's throwing farther than the rest of us, but everybody's still got to throw really hard to compete. Not a lot of technique change between Frisbees, I'll call them Frisbees, non-beveled discs and beveled discs. I mean, that's where the technique change happened. But from an arrow to a destroyer, it's not much different.
Definitely. Here, let's stretch it out.
All right.
I got a good wind.
You got a good wind? Look at that. That is a good disc. I think Discraft, if you're watching Jim Kenner, bring this back. Make these, because you can get them up to probably 210 grams because of the size.
There it is. Beautiful.
I am going to show you a throw that nobody in the world does. Okay, so you know what a guidus is?
Yep.
Right hand over left foot, and if you've never heard of it, and you go right hand over right foot, it's actually really easy. So it's right hand over left foot as a guidus catch. A guidus throw, which virtually nobody does, is to throw the disc backhand, but under your left leg if you're right-handed. Not your right leg, that's easy, everybody can do that. Under your left leg. So the throw I do is a guidus throw that I throw from up here. And I'll put Z's on it too. Ready?
Yes. What? I felt like it was respectful to do this.
Yes.
Oh!
Yes.
Oh, thank you so
I gotta
much.
be careful with my hand. See this? Oh, this is the bump. Look at that.
Oh, no.
No, it's nasty, right?
Well, this is something to end the episode. I'll do something awkward with you.
Oh, good. Awkward's good.
I do this with every lefty that I meet, but I know you're not lefty. You ever shaken someone's hand lefty?
Never.
That's not how you do it. Nope. No, I know.
I don't.
I know. Ugh.
Oh my God, you're right. No one.
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was prejudiced until this very moment
Yep.
against lefties.
I think that's the close. I think we're done.
Thanks, guys. Put your left hand up here.
Okay.
Lift your right leg and try to throw under that right leg from up here.
Back like this?
No, so if I was right-handed, it's this, it's up here, but throwing under my left leg.
What?
Yeah, it's impossible, right?
Sounds like it.
It does sound impossible. Except it's, oh, and I threw it in the water. I knew I was gonna do it once today. Hold on, I wanna do it again though, so.
We're going swimming.
Coming up next on Catch. Did Brian drive Yuli bonkers when they toured together?
There's so many things you were figuring out, but what did you actually think about me when we were first touring together? When we first got in that RV, I drove you nuts, didn't I?
Find out next time on Catch. Catch the next episode on the Disc Golf Network January 28th with the JomezPro YouTube release February 4th.